Joss Whedon. Thanks for coming. Our guests today need little introduction to any of you in this room. Their combined fantasy worlds alone could inspire a 4-day fan convention in proverbial pop culture Mardi Gras. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Angel. Firefly. Dollhouse. Dr. Horrible Sing-Along Walk. Felicity. Alien. Lost. Maybe we should just save the applause for the end. This is a really long resume. Fringe. Mission Impossible. Cloverfield. And Star Trek. These are the signature works of Joss Whedon and J.J. Abrams, but their creative fingerprints have been all over the pop culture of the past 20 years, as they have contributed to all sorts of entertaining joyrides, Toy Stories, and fun-time Armageddon in movies, television, and yes, even comic books. They produce, write, direct, make music, and have been known to act, and they, like you, are fans. Their work has been inspired by the passion they have for the stories of their youth, and their influences continue to inspire their current work, which is helping to lead us into the future of entertainment. Don't you think it would be cool if, like, J.J. Abrams and Joss Whedon, like, teamed up and, like, made a movie or a TV show? Well, they're not. But I say we bring them out here and bully them into it. Welcome to the stage, J.J. Abrams and Joss Whedon. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us.
The people are excited. So you guys like know each other, right?
Yes, we do. We have met. Back in the day, on WB, when we were doing Felicity, and you were doing your spectacular shows. Yes, we were. We met at the parties. We think. We don't remember very well. But we do know each other.
Yeah.
And then we've never met.
Have you had the opportunity to, like, talk to each other often, or, you know, exchange notes or anything?
Yeah, we partied. No, we haven't, not that hard. We've not partied. But we've hung out, we've had dinner, but we don't see each other that much. We seem to be kind of busy. But I hear about you through, like, Drew Goddard and stuff. Yes, Drew Goddard. This entire panel will be about Drew Goddard. He told me to say that.
Before we get into sort of like the questions, just let you know we will have time for questions from you guys, so we're going to leave that toward the end. You guys have been to Comic-Con many times. You guys are big fans of the things that you love. What's the most extreme thing that you guys have done in the name of fandom and in your entire pop culture consuming life? JJ, you want to take that one?
The most extreme thing?
Yeah. Or
I mean, when I was a kid, I would send fan letters to people that I love, but usually they were not actors or directors. They were usually like the makeup people. So like I sent letters to like Dick Smith and Tom Savini, and Dick Smith did like The Exorcist, and he was one of the greats. And he sent me the tongue from The Exorcist. I was like 14, and I opened up this box. It was a tongue, an extension with a note, handwritten note that said, put some peanut butter in it, stick it in, and my mom was like, what the fuck is that? She was that was mostly.
Do you still have the tongue?
Oh yeah.
You did?
I did. Should have brought this up. There's no way I can top the tongue.
You have nothing better than the tongue?
No, I do have an alien egg. But I had to bury the franchise in order to get it.
When did you guys decide that you wanted to be storytellers? What was the inspiration that made you want to do what you guys do today?
I decided that JJ wanted to be a storyteller. Young lad. I always wanted to be a storyteller. There's never been any doubt. I had no idea what form that would take. I just knew I couldn't make an honest living because that sounded hard. And I just felt, I had these universes in my head. I didn't study writing, and I knew I wanted to make films. Probably that was what it was going to be. And I knew I'd create them, but I didn't really think about writing them. And then when I started to write television specs, because I actually needed to eat food and live under a roof, that's when I realized, oh my God, writing is and will always be the thing by which I define myself.
I think that for me it was when I was a kid, I was, and I guess still am, the idiot who loved to do magic tricks for my relatives. So I was just always doing things, and they would be like, oh, wow, that was amazing, try and convince me they were amazed. But it was sort of that, I guess, that feeling of creating an illusion and making people believe something was real they didn't expect. And since I didn't really want to become a professional magician, although I'm certainly debating it still, the idea, sort of writing seems, I guess, like a filmmaking, sort of a natural progression, and another option to do sort of the same thing in a different way.
Now, I just want to, not to bring up Drew Goddard again, but he and Brian K. Vaughan were having an argument about whether comic book nerds or magic nerds were more pathetic. And where do you stand on that?
Well, I mean, the honest answer is, you can make a joke, I could say magic nerds, but I think, honestly, that neither are really pathetic, but I think really magic nerds.
Yeah. Well, Brian also wore a cape when he did his. Did you wear a cape?
I didn't wear a cape.
Okay, then you're cool.
And I always wanted a top hat. Never had one of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of being a comic book nerd, Joss, you have...
Should we wake everyone up first?
Wake up!
I didn't know if we bored you to death.
No, they're into it. They're totally into magic nerd stories. Joss, your superhero comics, comic books of all stripes, very important to you. And now you are directing probably one of those eagerly anticipated superhero movies ever, The Avengers. Is that true?
That is not an official thing. Because I think Marvel couldn't afford a press release. So can I just make that an official thing? I'm directing The Avengers. It's just a gig.
Were The Avengers a big part of your comic book reading when you were a kid?
Yeah, they were one of the first books when George Perez was drawing them. They're on Counter-Earth. This was a big deal for me, yeah. Squadron Supreme, I'm just saying.
How did the comic book things happen for you? I mean, how did you start falling in love with them? And
this actually, in a roundabout way, because my dad was the head writer of the Electric Company, and they were going to do Spidey. They were going to do Spidey stories. So he came home with a bunch of old Spider-Man comics when I was about 9. And, just, sure, hand your son meth. That's great. Never went back.
And that's how the comic book love.
So,
and what were sort of the seminal kind of superhero stories of your youth?
There's so many that, it would take forever. But I'm just going to go with the Avengers annual and the Thing 2-in-1 annual that Jim Starlin did with the Death of Warlock.
Nice.
That was, for me, the beginning of grown-up comics. That is the most underrated, overlooked piece, I think, in the whole Marvel universe.
JJ, were you into superhero comics at all? Is that a big touch on you?
I was not as much as Josh, but I worked at a comic book store when I was a kid. One of the first jobs I had, and I was just 15 years old, and I got a job in the store in LA, and the first day on the job, the guy was a really weird dude who owned the store. I don't know what he was on, but he gave me the keys, and he's like, I'll be back, I'll see you tomorrow. And he left, and I was alone in the store with the keys. He didn't even tell me how to lock the door. So I kind of wanted to steal some of the older Spidey books that were there, and I didn't do it. I probably should have done it. But so I would read books, there, and I got into it. But I was never into it as much. I was more like into Twilight Zone and more TV and movie stuff.
At one point, you did write a script for a Superman movie. It didn't get made, but
Very well received.
But is that a genre that you'd be interested in returning to, like superheroes, or is that
Sure, yeah, sure. I'd be open to anything, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Joss, is it too early to talk about kind of like what your take is on the Avengers, even if you could just sum it up in a line?
I have to have a take?
Yeah. It's helpful when you're a director to have kind of a take on it.
Okay. It is a little early. I am still writing an outline. I'm still in that stage of reworking it. I will say that the thing that I love about it, the thing that made me excited to do it, was just how completely counterintuitive it is. It makes no sense. These people should not even be in the same room, let alone on the same team. And that, to me, is the very definition of family.
JJ, you grew up making films on the Super 8 camera. You also grew up loving the films of Steven Spielberg. And now you are making a movie called Super 8 with Steven Spielberg. And is that like a total coincidence?
Is it a coincidence?
Is that a coincidence?
It's sort of a dream come true, honestly. The strange thing, this is a weird story. When I was 16 years old, Matt Reeves Matt directed Cloverfield, and we created Felicity together. Matt and I went to Super 8 Film Festival in LA, and the LA Times wrote a story about it that came out the next day, and we got a phone call that day from Steven Spielberg's assistant, who at the time was Kathy Kennedy, and she said, Steven made films when he was your age, and they're damaged. The splices are sort of coming off, little tape splices. Would you guys be interested in repairing them? And Matt and I were like, yeah, we've got finals, but we could probably also repair Steven Spielberg's movies. And they said, great, we'll drop them off. So someone comes and drops off these two original films, Firelight and Escape to Nowhere, that Steven Spielberg made when he was a kid. And these are the original, there are no copies, these are the original movies. And it says on the film, which of course we watched them, it says written and directed by Steve Spielberg. And I was like, Matt, we must take a frame of this. We have to. He was like, no, we can't do that, no. So we didn't steal it. And anyway, a lot of almost theft in my childhood. So we repaired these movies. They were shot on regular 8, not Super 8, and we like peeled off every splice and put it back on. And it was just watching these movies that he made. It was insane, and it was just so inspiring. And I had no idea why this was happening. It felt like a complete joke. Because isn't there a building somewhere at Universal that's designed to house the team that restores Steven Spielberg's films that he made when he was a kid? So we prepared these movies, and they picked them up. They gave us $300, and that's when I knew why they had us do it. But anyway, so years later, this is a couple years ago, I called Steven and I said, I have an idea for a movie called Super 8, and I sort of pitched him, and he was very excited about it because I knew, having, in a weird way, worked on those movies, I had a sense of what he had done when he was a kid.
What can you say about Super 8? Is this also the case a little too soon, or can you say?
I think it's way too early. I mean, I would love to, show you footage, but we haven't shot any. My favorite thing about the movie, though, is that someone, will go to the theater and see the trailer and hopefully say, oh my God, that looks bitchin', and have no idea they're starring in it. So we're shooting in September. We haven't shot the movie.
Now, what has been the collaboration like been with Steven so far? I mean,
It's unbelievable. It really is surreal. And because there is a genre element to the movie, it's impossible to work with him and not constantly reference the work he's done, and you don't want to sound like you're being a sycophant. But it's been incredible. He's been beyond helpful, and the movie is, I think, very much in the spirit of some of the Amblin films that he made years ago. So it is a dream come true, and I couldn't imagine working on something that was more sort of personal and also kind of hyper real. You know, it's not like the movie is some kind of autobiography, but there's a lot of stuff in it that feels very personal.
Will a film called Super 8 be in 3D?
No.
No?
Very interesting.
Interesting.
You're welcome.
Let's talk about 3D filmmaking, because that's been a big storyline in movies this year. Are you guys fans of the current 3D? I mean, do you like 3D as a movie-going experience? Not as movie makers, but as moviegoers.
Honestly, I'm totally into it. I love it. I really think the technology is really good. It kind of puts you in the space. It doesn't give me a big headache. And I think that it's being done so much now that we're past the eat the pancake, sort of poke things at the screen era of 3D, and you can just sort of, it just adds a little something. There are definitely movies where, that shouldn't be in 3D. I don't know, like Cabin in the Woods, although I was watching Once Upon a Time in the West, I was like, this might be okay. It's all about space.
The thing that's really great about 3D though is when we put the glasses on, everything just gets dim. Like, it all feels a little sort of gray and muted, and I feel like I want to see the vibrant, I want to see the movie, and I feel like you get into it. But for me, it always had that, my brain adjusts to it after a while, but it always had those first few minutes are always like, oh wow, this seems like less than, the experience, like an IMAX experience to me, which is my favorite kind of experience, because it's so, immersive. But the 3D thing for me, I'm not totally on board yet, but I'm sure it's too late for me, so.
I mean, as storytellers, are there any opportunities? Are you writing to 3D in any way in your current project? Writing to 3D with 3D in mind?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I'm not. There's definitely no. And then the sharp thing comes right at him. The thing is, if you're making an action movie, 3D. It lends itself to that anyway. Things are going to come at the screen. You're going to want to get that sense of space. You're going to want to get that sense of where they are and how they're coming at each other. It's going to be that kind of experience anyway. It's going to work in 2D. The movie has to work in 2D. Most people will see it that way. So you just you'll take it into account ultimately when you're framing. But I don't think it doesn't really change the way I shoot. There are a few things. You want, a sort of a sense of, depth of field, where you get, that you get with the shorter lenses or wider lenses. I like those anyway. You don't cut as much because, it messes up the eye, but I like that anyway. We want things to be coming at people, so it's exciting. I also like that. So it hasn't changed anything except it's going to make it harder to shoot.
Years ago, I was in New York and I was kind of a little sick, and it was late at night, and I turned the TV on. I wasn't feeling very well. And I was switching the channels, and this movie came on. It was about a bunch of young adults, and they were acting really weird, and they were really scared about something, but it kept doing weird jump cuts, and I had no idea what they were scared of, and then they would offer someone something, and they're like, here, do you want some food? And they push right out, and the person would say, sure, thanks. And they take it, like, what the hell? And they were talking about these romantic scenes that didn't exist, and I realized it was Friday the 13th 3D with no 3D, no violence, no sex. Everything was cut out. And it's actually better.
Joss, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned Cabin in the Woods. Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about why the 3D kind of conversion came about, and when are we going to see this film?
I'll answer the second question first. The fate of the studio that has the movie is in flux. Therefore, they've put James Bond on hold, and I don't think we come before him. So we really don't know what. The film is finished. The 3D thing came because they looked at the schedule and said, oh my God, every horror movie is going to be 3D forever for the next few years, and so we should convert it now. That, by the way, may still happen. But Drew shot something very specifically in
a classical mode. Like he went away from, really in your face and tried to keep things sort of, we were studying John Carpenter and really keep the suspense and make it almost a little old-fashioned. So what we're hoping to do is be the only horror movie when we come out that's not in 3D, so that we can advertise 2D. You believe things can move across the screen. It's painterly. It's going to be, a revolution on the industry.
Last question about 3D for you guys, which is, do you think that this is just a fad, or do you think it's kind of really changing the way we're going to see movies? It's changing the way maybe that like young kids going to movies are what they expect from film? I mean, is it here to stay, do you think?
I have no idea.
You have no idea?
I don't. I really don't. I mean, my guess is that it will continue. The equipment will be there. The technology will get better. It will continue. Not everything will be made in 3D, but a lot will. I have no idea.
I don't think it's a fad. And I do think it is kind of extraordinarily immersive when it works. But everything is always going to be built for a zillion different platforms, and many of them are simply not going to be 3D. So it's going to be there, but it's not going to like take over completely. Watch it 3 years from now, my phone will be like, whoa.
Joss, a couple of years ago, you made a little thing called Dr. Horrible's Sing Along Blog. And you did that for many reasons. You created it at a time when television writers were on strike. And there was a lot of talk about whether or not the internet could be sort of a viable alternative for TV writers as a mode of expression or a business model. Looking back on that now, kind of like how do you feel about the internet opportunity, and is that like a future mode for you to do more?
Well, gosh, I hope so. I definitely feel like I missed my window a little bit. After Dr. Horrible, I sort of kind of was like waiting for everybody else to show up at the party. I was like, okay, now we're going to get this all together. We're going to make a ton of internet stuff. It's going to be really interesting. Dr. Horrible made money, and it made money for me, but I was the studio, but also for the writers, the actors, all of whom were profit participants. So it really worked as a model by which people can actually go ahead and make a profit on the internet. People always say, well, there's no money there at all. There's less. Obviously, there's much less than can be had in movies and TV, but it can be done. And I was proud of that model because, it benefited many of the artists who worked on it. And me as the studio benefited more. So that was great. But then I really did think, well, people will see this and want to get in on it. But the studios, their views of how it would work were extraordinarily old-fashioned. And I kind of sat on my hands. We were trying, obviously, to, create, say, a sequel. Part of the other problem was that we all had jobs. That was also my fault. But